Joined by one of the newest inductees with the Vancouver Broadcast Hall of Fame at the Vancouver Canadians here, Bob Robertson, longtime voice for the Spokane squad. First up, Bob, congratulations on the induction the other night.
Well, thank you. Originally, it was a nice surprise because I've had a few things happen to me along the way, but I've never received honors like that in a country where I don't live.
Got to be nice. You were the only one I saw wearing a Vancouver Canadians hat, especially on your own team.
Yeah, and I was afraid that perhaps I would lose my meal money for the trip when my players from Spokane saw that. The folks from the Kangaroo Court haven't caught up with me yet.
Let's look back, albeit years back, and I'm going back, aging myself as well. Let's look back. How did you get involved in broadcasting, and who started you?
Well, sports broadcasting wasn't where I went originally. Originally, when I was in the 6th grade at Model School down just off Cambie by the City Hall, I was hired by the CBC, then CBR down in the Vancouver Hotel, to be a part of the British Columbia Schools broadcast. And from that, they started using me as a child actor on dramatic shows that were produced there with a pretty good group of actors along the way, so I learned some tricks from them. So I got interested in broadcasting. We moved away from Vancouver up to Saskatoon during the Second World War after that, and I kind of lost touch with it again until I got into high school, and I was living at Point Roberts at the Boundary Bay side and going to Blaine High School by bus every day, and I kind of got interested once again, only this time I got interested in sports broadcasting. And so after spending a little bit of time at Western Washington, and it was then Western Washington College of Education, now just university in Bellingham, I signed a baseball contract to play professional baseball, which was really my first love. That's what I really wanted to do. And about the same time, I was offered the broadcasting job in Wenatchee with the Western International Class B Wenatchee team, and I had to mull it over and decide which one to go with, and I think the fact that I was a poor college student and needed money immediately, I went with the one that started paying next week instead of at the end of April. So that was what got me off in the professional broadcasting ranks, and from there it was, move up from a small market to a larger market and work your way up and just keep at it and work hard and hope for the best.
Was there any one specific individual, and of course one that comes to my mind is Vince Scully. Two things. One is, was there anyone that you looked up to idolize? And secondly, did you have any contact and working relationship with Vince Scully?
I did not with Scully, although I have often said I'm not going to retire until he does, and he met the other day and said he's coming back again next year, so I may be stuck. But there were a number of people in the Seattle broadcasting market who were very kind to me when I first showed up on the scene as a youngster. I was suddenly thrust into their midst to do things like the state high school basketball tournaments for my local station, and there were guys there, Ted Bell and Rod Belcher and Clay Huntington and people like that, Pat Hayes. They gave me a lot of good advice and helped me out. They squired me around because I didn't have a car and made sure I didn't get lost in downtown Seattle. So people like that were very, very good to me, and I do have to say that the administrators at Blaine High School were good to me. I think, held out very little hope that I would amount to anything, but they did move heaven and earth to get me into college at Bellingham so I could play some football and baseball and also follow the radio thing. So there were a lot of people along the way. And I was helped by having audition tapes moved along a couple of times. That's how I got to Bellingham. From Bellingham to Wenatchee was somebody connected with the station, recommended me to the Wenatchee station. The same thing when I moved from Wenatchee to Tacoma. I actually applied for a job in Yakima. It wasn't open, and they sent the tape along to a station, co-owned station, and I ended up in Tacoma, which was much better. Met my wife there, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But there were a lot of people who did help. One of them was the broadcaster at Notre Dame when I went back there, and I showed up on the practice field one day, brand new in town. Nobody knew me, and he spotted me and across the field and walked across the field and introduced himself, the voice of the Fighting Irish with a 600 station network, and he was kind enough to walk over and shake my hand and say, anything I can do to help, let me know. You meet a lot of good people like that along the way.
Yeah, that's got to be a nice feeling to have somebody walk across the field and say that to you.
Yeah, his name was Joe Boland. He had played under Newt Rockney at Notre Dame. He was a lineman, and He was the voice of the Fighting Irish all those years. You could hear him anywhere in the world on Saturday broadcasting Notre Dame games, and he was kind enough to greet me as the newcomer in town.
Games changed over the course of years. What's one of the biggest changes you've seen from a broadcaster's perspective?
Well, which game?
Take your pick.
Well, football, obviously it's in the midst of changing right now. It's going from the old days of the hard running and lots of hard blocking to everybody is a receiver, and they're all split all over the field. And we have a quarterback at Washington State who last year in 2 of his games attempted 85 and 89 forward passes, and he probably will top that this year at some point. The game has gone literally to an aerial game now, and I don't know how long that'll last before the defenses catch up. But the days of a 7-6 or a 7-3 victory, I think those are gone, and from now on it's going to be 46-43 and things like that in college ball at least. The pros may take a little longer because they have a few more bigger, faster bodies to play defense, but right at this moment the college game is basketball on grass.
And baseball, what's one of the changes there?
Well, baseball, we're changing rules now. You have such things as the don't block home plate, which I think takes the catcher out of where he can make plays often, and there'll be guys sliding by, reaching out with one hand and that sort of thing. I think the biggest change in baseball, though, since I came into it, is the length of time it takes to play a game, for heaven's sake. Here in Vancouver, we used to have double headers when you couldn't play Sunday baseball, and the old Capelinas down at 5th and Hemlock would play their games. On Saturday, they would play a double header, and they'd start at 2 and 8, and you'd play 2 o'clock game, everybody would go home, and you come back for the 8 o'clock game, and you'd still be home in time for bed. A game over 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes was a normal game, maybe on the long side. Now, you're talking about 3.5 hours to 4 hours for a baseball game, and while you've added an hour and a half to the game, I don't think you've added an hour and a half of excitement to the game. So it takes a really good baseball fan to come out on a regular basis. I hope they find some way, without upsetting the balance of the game, I hope they find some way to shorten it down, maybe make the guys stop fixing their gloves after every pitch and the pitchers wandering around, and managers have to take some blame too. They want to put in signs and signals, very complicated ones on every pitch, not just when they want something to happen. And I guess we as broadcasters have to take a little of it, because we want 2 minutes and 15 seconds between innings to get our commercials in. If we could get by with only 1 minute and 15 seconds, we'd chop 18 minutes out of a baseball game right there. So we do have to take some blame.
You look at some of the players, we were talking off camera with some of the players that have come through our Canadian system. We talk about James Paxton's currently with the Seattle Mariners, Michael Saunders out of Victoria. We talk about Jeff Francis out of the Delta area as well, Larry Walker. Why do you think, even American players, why do you think they're growing and the game is becoming so successful and so positive?
Well, I think worldwide, of course, Canada was a little bit ahead of the curve on that, but worldwide you have television, and kids everywhere are able to see baseball. They can pick their heroes and follow them and try to emulate them, and so they're learning the game a lot earlier. They sit there and watch a telecast, and they have a former Major League star telling them all about the game and why that play didn't work and why this one did and what you should be doing. And they see that. They can go to baseball camps now all over and have professional instruction. We didn't have that. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a baseball player. I had a little advantage young in that my dad played minor league professional baseball, and he wanted me to play. So I got good advice from him, but you didn't have that exposure to the major league stars telling you can buy a tape and take it home and it'll tell you exactly how to swing. And you swing a bat and you look at it over and over and over again. You're ready to play as soon as you get finished with that. So it's exposure to the game, and the game has kind of attracted the kids on its own.
What do you tell the parents that they're a pushy parent and they want their son or daughter, regardless of the sport, to sort of emulate what they wanted to do and they would never ever get to that level?
Well, I got a good look at that because I was a football, basketball official for 20 years of my life, and I always said that the best thing could happen to little kid baseball or any sport is for the parents not to come to the games. They come out there, they embarrass the kids. If a kid has a bad day, by the time he gets in the car to go home, he's in tears because he has to ride home with with Dad and Mom and brothers and sisters. I just think you should let the kids play the Little League World Series, for example. I watched some of that, but I'm really not in favor of kids age 12 doing something that will be the highlight of their entire lives. Those kids who played there, and especially the winners, what are they going to do individually in the future that will top that? So I let the kids alone. We used to go out, find an empty lot, and a baseball that still had part of the cover on it, and we'd play all day long. We'd play that one-a-cat where you work your way up to hit. The best guys would be at the plate most of the day, sure, but the kids who were in right field were still playing baseball out there. We had a good time doing it. It was fun. Now kids have to have uniforms and a schedule and umpires and hopefully television before they want to go out and play. We used to go out and play all day long until it was too dark to play, or Mom said, "You get your tail home for dinner."
What's been the highlight of your career, if you can pick one?
Well, other than meeting my wife when we were both pretty young, and we had a good long time together. But from a standpoint of broadcasting, I don't know whether there was any one. I think probably the most memorable was the first day at Notre Dame, working in Tacoma, Washington, and a little radio, a little television station, and suddenly somebody calls you on the phone and says, "Will you fly back to South Bend, Indiana? We want to interview you." And I didn't know that I really wanted to do that, but so I went back. I figured, well, what the heck? They're not going to hire anybody from out on the West Coast suddenly to do Notre Dame football and basketball. But I flew back because they were paying my way. So I got back there and they interviewed me and said, "Well, now we'll talk it over and we'll let you know this afternoon." So I went and saw a movie in South Bend, an afternoon movie. And when I got through the movie, I called back expecting them to say, "Well, thank you for coming." They offered me the job. And so I couldn't turn it down then. It was too appealing to it. I think I was 20, just barely 26, and it was too appealing. Notre Dame, for heaven's sake. That's kind of the apex of college sports. The NFL wasn't that big yet, so college sports were really big. So we did take it. Loved Notre Dame, hated the weather in the Midwest, and eventually just made our way back to the West Coast where we started from and settled there. We decided then that that's where we wanted to be.
You're obviously enjoying your time with Spokane, listening to you up here call the middle three innings of the games all the time, and you're just full of enthusiasm from our point of view, and you're just having fun. You bring life to the game, and that's one of the big key roles that you have, is to make the fans at home like they're a part of the game.
Well, that's what we're paid to do. We're entertainers. We're reporters. We want to be accurate, but we're also entertainers, so we want to make people feel like they're right in the middle of the game. I don't know how many years I recreated baseball games and other games as well, hockey, basketball, and soccer, recreations where I was not with the team on the road. I'd be in the studio at home, and we did that. And you tried to make that as entertaining as you could without being ridiculous. Of course, you could, you could do things that would mess the whole procedure up, but try not to do that. But you're an entertainer as well as a reporter when you broadcast play-by-play, and I think it's a shame not to convey the enthusiasm level of the game itself. If you don't convey that to the audience, I think you're missing a bet. You're doing a disservice.
I remember a longtime broadcaster in Vancouver, very synonymous with sports in British Columbia and Canada, Jim Robertson, telling me about the same thing about recreating games and sound effects.
Yeah, Jim and his partner, they had a pretty good set of sound effects. Mine came along better later when I was able to go down to spring training and record things and get them on the tapes, the cartridges that would give you the crack of the bat, and then the cartridge would stop, automatically queuing up to the next crack of the bat. And all I had to do was say, "Here's the pitch, swing it," and I push the button and I'd whack. That all helped. But it helped to know the game because you were the eyes of the game. You had to know what was going on the field in order to be accurate with your description of the game. So it was important to know the game.
And lastly, you're enjoying your time with Spokane. How's the travel helping out for you?
Travel is kind of crazy for me. I live on the west side in a place called University Place near Tacoma. And of course, the Spokane Ball Club is in Spokane, 307 miles away from my house. You get the idea that I've done it. But on top of that, I do the Washington State football, and they're in Pullman, which is just south of Spokane by an hour and a quarter. So I've traveled over the mountain pass, I think, as many times as anybody in in history, probably. 530 Cougar football games, and I don't know how many baseball games. I'm also doing the same thing, the 3 innings in the middle with the Tacoma Pacific Coast League team. So I get to see people from Ladner and Victoria every once in a while.
Well, you're enjoying yourself. You're doing a great job. And on behalf of everybody that's connected with baseball in British Columbia and Canada that listen to the broadcast, I know that we just love listening to your voice and what you bring, the excitement, the enthusiasm to the game itself. It's just our pleasure, and I really thank you very much for doing it.
Well, thank you. Thank everybody involved with the award. It's going to be one I treasure. Until the very end, I will treasure that award because it has a very special meaning to it, and it was presented here in Vancouver.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.